Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
This is the Prepped and Polished podcast, episode 268, with returning guest Jared Cooney. Be sure to join our Prepped and Polished community. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram. Just type Prepped and Polished. And you can access all of our podcasts, preppedandpolished.com/podcast. This is episode 268. Jared's coming back on the show. Jared is an award-winning cognitive neuroscientist, best-selling author, and renowned keynote speaker. He has an expertise in human learning, memory, and brain stimulation. Dr. Horvath has published 6 books, over 50 research articles, and currently serves as an honorary researcher at University of Melbourne, St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne. His research has been featured in popular publications, including New York Times, Wired, the BBC, The Economist, TEDx, PBS's Nova, and ABC's Catalyst. On today's episode 268, we're going to be talking about good learning and study habits and how to correctly use technology to better your learning. This is a must listen to if you're a student, and if you're distracted by all this AI going on, listen even closer. So I hope you enjoy this episode, this conversation with Jared, and I'm glad he's back on the show. Enjoy it. Jared, I'm really excited that you're back on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How you been?
Good. It has been quite some time. I'm in the U.S. now instead of Australia, so back to my old stomping grounds.
Awesome. Good to see you back. And can you remind the audience how you became an educational neuroscientist?
Yeah, so I was a teacher originally. So teaching was my passion, but I was teaching during the decade of the brain. So I just heard so much stuff about the brain that I decided, cool, let me go tap into that, see what that's all about. And I genuinely thought that'd be like a year of my life, but I've now been stuck in academia for 16 years. I've been studying this stuff. And so I've kind of moved, it's the neuroscience is still my foundation, but basically now I do anything science of learning. So neuropsych, AI, behavioral economics, if it deals with learning, my job has been now to synthesize that, bring that back to everyone and say, here's what it means. Here's the good stuff. Here's the stuff you can kind of ignore. So it's been a heck of a journey. And one of these days I'll be back in the classroom.
Wonderful. Okay, so we deal with a lot of students and families, so I'm sure they're anxious to know good study habits, good study techniques. So I know it's kind of a broad question, so you can answer it in many ways, but when you think of best study techniques in general, what kind of comes to your mind?
There are a couple things. Is one, if we differentiate between studying and learning. So sometimes we go home and we got to take in something brand new. Like here's a new class that I have to take, or here's a book that I've never read before that I have to take in. Anytime you're doing new learning, you've really got a very hard limit. So human beings can really only take in about 3 to 4 hours worth of new information per day. And the reason, I won't bore anyone with it, but it has to do with the energy system used in the brain. There's only so much energy you can use to bring in new stuff. And that's kind of tapped out based on how much you sleep the night before. So you typically say 3 to 4 hours is kind of your window. Cool. So some people, when they go home and they learn something new, they might go 5, 6, 7 hours. And the joke is you don't got time for that. At about the 3 to 4 hour mark, you're going to burn that system out. Anything you do past there, you're going to feel like you're still doing work, but the system will not take it in. So already, if you're doing new learning, just think about that kind of 3 to 4 hour limit, and also be wary of diminishing returns. So for anyone who's really interested, the term you want to look up is called astrocytic glycogen. So that's the secondary energy source your brain needs to take in new kind of information. And that's where you've got the limit. Another funny thing about astrocytic glycogen is you get diminishing returns. Once you tap into that system and start learning new stuff, at about the 30-minute mark, your brain will start to push back. It'll start to say, hey, you're using too much of this. What if we need this later? And it'll start to pull it back, and you get diminishing returns to the point where if I have a new group of kids study something brand new for, say, 60 minutes, another group of kids study the same stuff for 30 minutes, the group who studies for 60 minutes only learns about 9% more. So that extra 30 minutes basically gave them nothing. They did all their major learning that first 30 minutes. That's when the system starts to push back. So if you're doing new learning, remember that limit and kind of come and go in waves. Give me about 25, 30 minutes on, go take a breather, let the system reset, come back. Give me 25, 30 minutes on, step away. That's the best kind of way to think about new information. If we then think about study as something I already know, I'm now just practicing. So let's take new learning off. Now we're going to practicing. Cool. You can practice all day, every day. We're not going to run out of energy there. So when it comes to practicing and learning, kind of your three big things are going to be: one, focus attention. And that's going to hinge pretty deeply onto the tech and AI stuff, which we might talk about later. But the worst thing, single worst thing human beings can do for learning and memory is multitasking. Hands down. No one can do it. Everyone thinks they can do it well. And the joke is the better you think you're doing it, the worse you actually are at it. No one can do it. So if you gave me, say, 50 minutes of study with no multitasking versus 4 hours of studying the same stuff while multitasking, you'll learn up to 60% more in that 50 minutes versus that 4 hours, just because you're not doing the one thing that's going to kill the system. So step one, stay focused. Step two, recall is everything. So the only way memory works is through recall. Anytime you pull up a memory, your brain will start to replay that memory dozens, if not hundreds of times. That's how you get a deeper memory. Anytime you put information back into your brain, the brain won't replay it immediately, and it might not ever replay it again. So if you're studying and you're just rereading your notes, you're putting the information back into your brain, you're rewatching a lecture, you're putting it back in, you might not get a big hit. But if you're quizzing yourself, if you're doing flashcards, if you're taking in some work examples or a practice exam, and you're forced to pull that information out, that's when you're going to get that replay. That's where you're going to get deeper memories. So we're focused, we're using recall. You're doing the heavy lifting, the hard work. And then the third thing I'd say is, if you're going to be doing recall, the one trick to always remember is anytime you recall a memory, your brain can and often will change it. Our memory is horrible. So this is why, like, your memory for your childhood, it's not accurate. We remember our childhood the way we think it should be. Like, I remember last Thanksgiving, my brother was telling a story about how we left him in the mall one day and he was lost. And I'm like, that's a really interesting story. Too bad it happened to me. That's my story. He just somehow had replaced himself. And he's like, oh, my dad's like, yeah, no, that didn't happen to you. Okay. Really? So the point is, if we're going to be doing recall and we have this ability to change memories, it's worth having some sort of feedback to make sure our recall stays accurate. So if I'm going to be doing, like, just think of flashcards, probably the best example. On the front, it asks me a question. Hey, what's 1 + 1? Recall, I think it's 2. If I have nothing to bounce that against, that might go back wrong. If I said I think it's 3, yeah, cool. And I'll fight to say, you told me it was 3. But a flashcard, you flip it over and there's your feedback. It says, nope, the correct answer is 2. Now that memory is going to stay accurate. So if we're going to be doing recall, make sure you have something to bounce it against, some sort of feedback to keep those memories accurate. Recall deep, feedback accurate. You keep focused and remember those two kind of principles, that's kind of going to be your best bang for your buck anytime you're just sitting down to study stuff you already know.
Wonderful. Okay, so that's loaded.
There's
that
you just got a semester right there.
Yeah, just right there, crash course. Okay, so hypothetically, what would be a good way to implement what you said when getting ready for an exam?
So I think, thankfully, when it comes to prepping for an exam, that's stuff that we should have already learned. So what I'm thinking is, already you're going to want to be doing in advance, prep your week. Don't leave anything to chance. So come Sunday, you sit down and you say, Monday we're doing this, Tuesday we're doing this, Wednesday. You prep your week in advance. That's just going to make it easier. And realistically, one of the weird things we've seen is if you have a hard copy calendar and actually write that stuff out, you are more likely to follow that routine than if you type it into a digital calendar or just think to yourself, oh, I'll remember this. So get a piece of paper, get a calendar, write this stuff out, off you go. Think in short blasts. Give me it still, even with stuff that you're prepping, if you think in short blasts, that's going to help you avoid multitasking. So realistically, this is one of the weirder things you may hear, but we see it all the time. People who study, you will get the biggest bang for your buck in 60 minutes. That's it. Between 60 and 90 minutes, you'll get another little hit. But at about the 90-minute point, if you're still studying, we get a decusation. And now all of a sudden, people who are studying for, say, 3 hours are learning as little as people who are studying for 15 minutes. So it's not this, the more I do it, the more I learn. There's a real inverted U where you get all this benefit at the beginning, it starts to taper out, and then you actually start to harm yourself. And the reason for that, we think, has to do with energy properties as well. But then also this concept of sleep. We tend to lock our memories down when we sleep. Sleep is as important to prepping for an exam as anything else you're going to do. Sleep is when your brain gets to do its job and say, cool, you put in the work. Now let me lock that stuff down for you. You can only lock down so much stuff each night. Once you reach a certain point, your brain not only doesn't start locking stuff down, like it doesn't have enough time. If you study for 3 hours, it's like, I can't do all of that. I'll only give you 90 of that. But it also starts to push back. Once you go past a certain point, your brain's like, I'm too exhausted to lay down anything. And now I'm going to lay down less than if you would have just stopped and gone and hung out with your friends for the next hour. So a lot of people think cramming. Cramming will work within 48 hours. But what you want to do is plan your week. Give me about 1 hour of study a night. And that's total. That's not per class. That is total. Give me that focused study, step away. Next day, come back, step away. The biggest thing you can understand with study, it's frequency is more important than quantity. If you can give me even 10 minutes a night, every night, that is tons better than giving me 5 hours in one night. It's about these short blasts with sleep in between. That's how you really let the system kind of take it in, lock it down, move on. Take it in, lock it down, move on. So I'd say plan your week, focus on these strategies of, cool, I'm going to keep things short, I'm going to keep things focused, and whatever you're doing study-wise, I don't want to dictate to you how to do it, but if you consider that concept of recall, what are you doing that's going to force you to put in the work? Don't read your notes, try and rewrite your notes from memory, then check them back for accuracy. Don't simply read a chapter, go to the questions on that chapter first, try and answer them. What do I know about this stuff? Then go back, read the chapter again to check for accuracy. You're going to see a lot more failure when you're doing recall because we don't know everything. But that failure is the thing that's pushing you in the right direction. The recall is making the memories deep, and anytime you screw up, that's going to trigger the system to say, you better remember what you just screwed up on. And all of a sudden it becomes easier to start correcting your mistakes than just generally trying to put new information in. So it's a little more work. You're going to suck a little bit more than you normally would if you were just rereading a chapter or something, but that's the work that's going to make it a lot easier for you in the long run.
So, okay. So a lot of students, they multitask.
Yeah.
Are they after hearing you, is there one of the reasons they're multitasking because maybe they're actually crashing and they're just like giving themselves a break and they're like, all right, yeah. And
they try and fight through it. Let's say you hit that maybe 30-minute mark where you get that diminishing returns and your brain's starting to say, dude, calm down. And you start, I'm just going to check my emails while I'm doing this. The better bet is exactly that. Step away. Go take 10, 15 minutes. Get out of that room. Go to another room. Sit down at a different computer. Check your phone. Go for a walk. Come back refocused. I think you're spot on. As a lot of people, once they get to a certain spot, their system starts to calm down. And they're like, well, let me do this while continuing to try and do this. Not a smart move at all. So once you feel yourself tapping out, let yourself tap out. Get out of there for a bit. And if you feel it come back on, sweet. Come back, reset. If you don't worry about it. We'll come back tomorrow night.
That's encouraging because it's offering a proactive solution when they might not have it. It's like, they're probably just like exhausted from studying, right? So then they're just like, okay, I want to like check some texts and do this while I study, but they're wasting their time going 5, 6, 7 hours deep. You're saying, look, step away, check your text, or, maybe, get a snack, come back.
Get something,
That's rewarding.
And one of the most interesting things, there's a group of runners in Kenya, the Kalenjin tribe. So they're the world's best long distance runners. And so I had a bunch of friends who went down to train with them. And they said one of the most interesting things is in the US and in Australia too, when you train, you train. Like you're an athlete, congratulations, you're doing your 3, 4, 5 hours of training a day, whether you want to or not. The Kalenjin, if they're not feeling it, they don't run that day. Like these are the best runners in the world that will start doing, they practice, they'll do 2 to 3 marathons a day just for training sometimes. If they get into it and they're about a mile in and they're like, no, my legs aren't in it, I'm not in it, they won't run. And so all my buddies who are over there who are still pushing themselves through these walls, and the Kalenjin are just laughing at them saying, no, you got to let the system tell you when it needs a breather. Let your body tell you when it's time to push versus when it's time to kind of calm down. And you'd think these people who take days off would never be the best runners. Nope. Because of those days off, because of that time, I'm only going to do a mile instead of my forced 26 miles today. That actually helps them in the long run. It becomes a better strategy to listen to your system.
Wow. I want to talk a little bit about the technology and using technology to help students learn. So first of all, what's your take on that? Is it a good thing? Is it detrimental?
No one likes to hear this. 40 years of data, tech by and large harms learning. Anything you do offline, you will learn better, understand it better, memorize it deeper than anything you do with a digital tool. And there are many reasons for that, but the biggest reason seems to keep coming back to multitasking. What do we just say is the worst thing you can do for learning a memory? Multitasking. 2,000 hours every year, minimum, students spend multitasking on their computer, jumping between movies, TV, videos, video games, all these, Facebook, all that stuff. Basically, computers beg us to multitask. They are parallel processors. You can have 10 things going at once. And when we use a computer, we tend to think like a computer. Cool, I will try and do 10 things at once. 2,000 hours outside of any classroom situation, that's how we train ourselves on these machines. Now, when I say sit down and it's time to learn on a machine, most people will make it 6 minutes before they start multitasking. That's how well we've trained ourselves to do the one worst thing for learning. So if you sit down to learn, you've got about a 5 to 6 minute window till most of us are going to start multitasking, in which case the learning is now done. And if you use a computer during class, most kids will recognize that as well. 38 minutes out of every 60, you will be off task multitasking. More than half of the time you use this machine, you won't be doing any learning. You won't be doing the thing we need, which means, and if you think about reset time, so let's say 38 minutes of every 60 you're off task. Now you need to reset yourself to whatever task you were trying to learn. Let's say that takes an additional 6 minutes. You're looking at now basically an average of 15 minutes out of every 60 that you're actually doing the thing you wanted to do. Whereas if you were doing that same stuff offline, 60 minutes is 60 minutes. You can't multitask. There's no tab to open. There's no music to do. So as much as it sucks, I always tell my freshmen, whenever I have freshman seminar, if you invest in one thing, printer. Print everything out, get everything offline as fast as you can. Do your work offline. You got to write something, you will remember more if you handwrite it versus type it. If you read something, you will remember it more if it's hard copy versus digital. If you need to manipulate stuff, like manipulatives for an engineering project or a math project, you will remember and learn more if you do it live versus if you use a screen to move around manipulatives. Anytime we can get off of tech, learning seems to go up, unfortunately.
Okay. So what about a situation where it's unavoidable, like the SAT has gone digital? I advise students, I'm old school, I'm older than you, but I'm used to paper tests, but the reality is a lot of these tests are going online. So while I completely am on your side about the importance of fiddling through the pages and kind of synthesizing information with the book and writing things out and doing SAT problems on paper.
Yeah.
When it comes to test day, those kids freak out because they have to go on a computer and actually simulate the conditions of the test. How do you negotiate that? Like with, say, an SAT that has gone digital and studying for that?
And it's funny, ever since the SAT, and in Australia it's the ATAR, VCAL, in UK, it's the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that's gone digital, scores have gone down. It was the stupidest move to go digital. Like globally, everything drops once you go digital. So just know that, yeah, everyone is taking that kind of hit. It's not a good system. But if you know you have to take it digitally, there's two things to think about. One is this.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, first, let's differentiate between learning mode and performance mode. Learning mode is when anything goes. You screw up, doesn't matter. You're in learning mode. You try something new because you want to be creative. Cool, doesn't matter. You're in learning mode. Performance mode, that's when failure, mistakes, trial and error suck. So like if I'm having open heart surgery, I do not want my surgeon to be like, you know what, I got an idea. What if I just connected this to, oh, and he's dead. That's all right. I'll get the next one.
Yeah.
So performance mode, you got to be locked down. Learning mode, that's when you can explore, experience, try things. If you focus only on performance, by and large, you do not learn. The two are dissociable in that sense. But if you focus on learning, performance almost always comes with it. So if you have a choice to focus on learning versus performance, always focus on learning. Performance will happen, whether you want it to or not, based purely on focusing on learning. So as an example, there's a school down in Ballarat that, again, they have to take digital tests to get funding. But the principal decided, you know what, forget it. We're no more grades in our school, no more marks. And with these standardized tests, I'm not going to tell the kids what they got. I'm not going to tell the parents. We're just never going to do performance. We're going to do it to get our money, but no one's going to know what the hell just happened. So when they started this, they were in the bottom quartile of the country. 2 years later, they were in the top 10% of the country. And the joke is he couldn't tell anyone because he's like, I knew it because I know the data. And he's showing me, he's like, look, our performance scores are through the roof. But my whole point of making this school is not telling people that performance is good. So by focusing on the learning, his performance went through the roof as well. So leading up to the SATs, don't worry about the performance of the SATs, learn the stuff. Like here's an example, the reading comprehension section on the SATs. There are about 6 or 7 different strategies that people tend to use on that. One says, skim the text, then go look at the questions. One says read the questions first and look for keywords. One says read a paragraph, then go over. There's like a bunch of different strategies people will say. So we decided, let's test these. So we got a bunch of kids and we said, test them. Here, do this strategy, do this strategy. Hands down, one of the strategies worked so much better than all the others. So much better that one of my colleagues said it would be morally wrong to teach students any other method than this one. What was that method? Read the dang passage. That's it. Just read it. For 10 minutes, do not worry about questions. Do not worry about testing. Do not worry about performance. For 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it's going to be, you read that passage. If it's about cars, you pretend you love cars and you just read it. If it's about theater, man, I can't wait to read about theater, and you read it. By simply reading the passage, now when you're focusing on the learning, now when someone asks you questions about that passage, you can answer them really easily because you did the learning. Versus performance mode. What's the right tech? Do I read the questions first? What do I need to know? So anytime you can focus on learning, that's going to bring your performance whether you want it to or not. So I'd say the vast majority of your time, you're offline. About 2 weeks before the SATs, that's when you're going to want to start transferring it online. Now you've done all your learning. So for the last, say, 14 days or so, every day you sign online and you do a practice SAT online. You get used to that system. You get used to pulling your knowledge up on there. 1 week, 2 weeks of that should be enough to transfer that learning into this realm without trying to do all your learning in this realm over the course of months of prep. So I'd still with you, I'd say most of the prep you're going to do, focus on learning, get off the computer, and only when it comes to crunch time, then we're going to really focus on practice test, practice test, practice test, practice test in situation, in context, do all of those online. Does that kind of make sense?
1,000%.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love that plan. One more question for you.
Yeah.
Let's talk AI. So again, I'm pretty confident me and our audience will know where you stand with it. Um, so I am seeing a lot of kids inevitably using it
Yeah.
to aid again their learning. So hopefully before you leave today, we can kind of come up with a way to responsibly use it.
Yeah.
But what's your take on ChatGPT and learning?
Horrible.
Okay,
it's
fair.
and it's what you'll see is if you go through the research, 95% of it is what we call promissory research. It's people saying how you might be able to use this tool, how, oh, here's a cool idea to use this tool, without ever showing data of does that idea actually work. Like it's
Yeah.
one thing to say, yeah, you could do this, but then cool. I'd much rather you take 100 kids, do that, and tell me did it work or not. Only about 5% is looked at impact. Of those 5%, oh boy, it's bad. What we're starting to see is it's the same problem with any computer, right? Multitasking just becomes an issue. But most kids, when they learn or try to learn or study with it, they just end up offloading that information. So, simple example, think about your phone. I know my phone number growing up, 721-7286. I haven't dialed that thing in 35 years, but I know it. I know my best friend's phone number from growing up, 740-7857. Don't dial it. I didn't give you the area code, but there you go. Haven't dialed that thing in 35 years. I do not know my best friend's phone number now. I do not know my wife's phone number now. 35 years ago, still got those. Today, don't have them. Why? Because I've offloaded that to a machine. Rather than actually learning the information itself, I've learned how to access the information. That's what we seem to be seeing with AI, is instead of learning the material, kids are learning to offload certain processes to the machine. Now, when we say, cool, can you do that? No, not without my tool. I never actually learned the stuff. I learned how to access the stuff. I learned how to play with the stuff. So rather than using AI to learn, it seems to be helping people circumvent the learning process. They can still get to the end product and they've learned something, how to use ChatGPT, but what they didn't learn was the process that I wanted you to learn. How do you actually do blank, or how does actually this work? So the trip and the secondary kind of aside then with ChatGPT is some people say, well, cool. What if I just use it for test prep? Like, give me 10 questions, multiple choice questions that I can use to recall. That sounds good, or that sounds very reasonable. 6 months ago, when we tried that, about 20% of everything ChatGPT spit out was wrong. Like it looked good, but it was wrong. And about 10% was complete gibberish. It wasn't even, the questions didn't even make sense. Those values have gotten worse. It's now up to about 35% wrong and about 15% gibberish. So ChatGPT, there's a phenomenon called model collapse. Basically, ChatGPT is getting worse. There will be no, I'm putting my flag in the sand now. If there is a ChatGPT 5, it will be no better than 4. And I don't ever think there will be a 5 because the whole system is now starting to crash. The joke is I only know this because I'm already an expert in my field. When ChatGPT gives me 50 multiple choice questions, because all I'm doing is vetting, I can say, that's right, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong.
Right.
As a student, you really can't vet yet. You're learning the stuff, you don't know the stuff. So you have to take basically everything it says on faith. It must be right. If you can assume, let's even make it be easy. Let's say 30% of everything you're going to get from ChatGPT is wrong. There's a chance that only 1% of what you get from a textbook or from a professor is going to be wrong. So if you have to pick a tool to prep from, just know textbooks literally have already been vetted. They were created for the express purpose of making sure you were getting not only the right information, but in the right order to help you learn it easier. Whereas a computer simply won't do that for you. So if for some reason you have to use ChatGPT to learn, to bring on questions, to do all this stuff, try and push it into a vetting mode. Don't try and learn new stuff from it. Try and take stuff that you're already decent at and then ask ChatGPT to do stuff with it and see if you can pick out where it's screwing up. You have to become the arbiter of what it's doing. And that seems to be, that would be my estimation. And again, I haven't run that research either, but that would appear to be, to me, the only way to make that tool work for you without learning wrong stuff, wonky stuff, or completely offloading the learning process. Basically, you become the teacher. And if you can't tell whether or not what it's doing is
Yeah.
good or bad, then do not take it as read. Go somewhere else and learn it. Go get a book. Go ask somebody and learn it. If you're just taking everything it spits out as, yeah, that must be true, it ain't going to work. So ask it questions, use it to study things that you know well enough that you can vet it and you kind of become its teacher, if that kind of works. That would be
Yeah.
my one thought with that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I would imagine, I mean, you're a neuropsychologist, that doing all of this stuff that you're saying, it's like kind of taking, like working and exercising your brain. This is good for brain health, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Like
The
you're looking out for
one
people's health.
the one thing, so people as we get older and
Yeah.
we're worried about, people say, do a Sudoku every day to
Hmm.
avoid degeneration. Do a crossword.
Mm.
The trick is if you do one thing every day, your brain will hold on to Sudoku bit, sure, but it's still going to get rid of everything else. So the trick isn't pick one thing and do it. The trick is you've got to keep working the system. You got to pick different things. So as we get older, whenever I work with adults, I say learn a new language, pick up a new instrument, play a new game, learn the rules of a new, like make a new group of friends, whatever. It's this novelty that forces us to work that keeps the brain healthy. So the best thing you can do for brain health is learn, which means the best thing you can do as a student is learn. That's going to be great for you, but you don't want to offload that learning. You start trying to make that process easy on yourself. That's like going to the gym and instead of doing a pull-up, you set the bar so you only have to do a 60-pound pull-up. It's
That's not
easier,
right.
but nothing's going to happen. Your body's going to be like, sweet, we're staying exactly the same. So you want to push the system, you got to work the system. If you're feeling totally comfortable learning, by the way, I'm an old man. I'm uncomfortable every time I have to learn something new. It always sucks. Like there's this argument being made that like you got to learn to love errors and you got to learn to love learning. You don't got to learn to love it. I would never. I love chocolate. I wouldn't say I love this. You got to learn to depersonalize it. We've got to learn to recognize it as a process, take it outside of ourselves, stop taking it personally, de-identify with it, and just run the process. When I have a upset stomach, I don't take it personally. I don't go, oh, I suck. I
Yeah.
think, dang, my stomach sucks. When I'm struggling learning, I shouldn't think I suck. I should think, man, that's the process. All right, we got to go through this process if we want to get it done. So the more we can recognize the process, I guess that's metacognition. Step away from it, recognize it as a biological system, and we can now start to use that system. Now I can start to run that system without taking anything personally. I might not ever love it, but my goodness, I know what I got to do to get to the next stage, and I know I'll love it when I'm done. So that's what keeps us going through it. So I have
Yeah.
this fear that the more we tell kids love making mistakes, you got to embrace making errors. Anyone who doesn't will just run away from it. So, but instead of saying you got to learn to love it, we got to learn to game it. You've got to learn to
Yeah.
recognize it so that we can give it a name and start to use it to our advantage as much as we can. That becomes you don't got to like it, but you got to recognize it so that we can play it right.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right. So, and what's the best way to get in touch with you? And just kind of follow your work and,
Yeah, if
be
you
a
go
fan
on
of Jared.
YouTube, I put out videos every once in a while on learning. So Jared Cooney Horvath is my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And then my website is lmeglobal.net. So that's just got a
Okay.
bunch of articles I write and blog posts and courses and stuff there. So that's probably the best way to get deep stuff. But if you just want some fun stuff, YouTube, that's where it's at.
Wonderful. You're the best. And I definitely want to bring you back on because this stuff is important. It's, and you're very generous, doing this kind of work for students.
Thank you. That's my
Yeah.
goals. I want us to be able to. I don't want to take anyone's time, but just real quick, I have to teach freshman seminar every couple of years, and so we have like 500 kids. And the trick is, I can tell within about a week or two which of those kids is going to pass fine, and which is going to fail. And I mean hard F. It'll be the first time some of these kids ever get an F in their life, and I can pick it out based on who understands learning as a process. I think one of the
Wow.
trippiest things is in high school, you've got some kids who recognize, cool, my job is to figure out how this works So when I get into the real world, I can do that myself. I can take agency over it. Those are the kids who are predicting what their teachers are going to do. The ones who are like, it's Friday, I'll bet she makes us do that because here's how memory works. Cool. Then you have a subset of kids who think learning is something done to them. And so when they get, that's all high school is what do you need me to do? What do I, then when you get to university and no one's there to tell you what to do, you will see me all of 6 hours and I am the one who gives you a grade, and you'll never talk to me. You'll never see me outside of class. If you called me and was like, what's homework? I'd be like, get the hell off the phone. Or if you're texting me or sending me an email, like, what do I need to do for this? No. So it's the kids who didn't quite recognize that learning is a process. It's going to take them a year or two of university or real world to start figuring out, wait, I got to do this myself. Yeah. So if you can start that earlier, metacognition, just start to recognize learning as a process earlier. Take agency. Learning isn't something done to you. You do it. Attention, engagement. Engagement isn't something done to you. You choose to engage. Anytime you have engaged with anything, that has been a conscious choice, whether it's a movie, a book, a class. You run this system. And once you learn how to run that system, that's when you start to fly. And that's when university becomes a whole heck of a lot easier for you.
Wonderful. Jared Horvath Cooney, thanks for coming back on Prepped and Polished Podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished Podcast. This was episode 268. If you want to work with Jared Horvath Cooney, go to his YouTube channel and just type in Jared Horvath Cooney, or go to www.lmeglobal.net. Stay tuned for our next episode. It'll be 269, and I look forward to having a conversation and you tuning in, and I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.